All right, so we did the web part prior in exercise 1. So in exercise 2, we're deploying a app for SharePoint. Okay, so not going to save that. Now this is something that will eventually do exactly the same thing as the previous. Okay, it's a something that plugs into SharePoint that displays the username. Okay. Now this app will be used as an app part, but every app for SharePoint has an entry page. That entry page here is default.aspx. Okay. This is SharePoint hosted, so that means SharePoint is the one that runs this page. Okay, but in a subweb. Okay. This contains our label. Okay. Our label has an ID called message. Oh. Now here's our JavaScript. Why do we need to use JavaScript? Because although it's an ASPX file, it's SharePoint hosted. SharePoint will not execute server-side codes. Okay. This is a non-file system deployment. We're not dropping the ASPX file like we did previously in the visual web parts. This is going to get uploaded like a content page. Its execution will be limited. Okay. So all the code that you want to do has to come from the client side. That's where our functionality resides. So again, although this file carries an extension of ASPX, this is not your ASP.NET Web Forms. There is no code behind. There's no server-side code. Okay. Cool. All right. And we also have a greet user part. Okay. .aspx, same thing. Everything is going to be done through the JavaScript. Right. So this greet user part ASPX will become the user interface of our app part. Okay. And notice we have a reference to greeting.js. Okay. So again, the difference between these two pages, this default.aspx is used in full page experience, and that's used as an app part. Okay. They'll be embedded and viewed differently, okay, but they both are doing the same thing. Okay. Has a label that shows you that your name. Cool. Now this is our greeting.js. We have an immediately executing function. Okay. Whenever the document has loaded completely, document.ready, that's a jQuery way of saying let's do this whenever the document has loaded completely. We want to run contasso.greeting.greetUser. So contasso.greeting is this page class, contasso.greeting, includes a greetUser method. Okay. And our greetUser is a method. Okay. Now you may want to notice this line here. Specifically, client context. In the first exercise, because our code runs on the server side, okay, SP context gives us the server side user context. Context means who are you? Which site are you looking at? Okay, what profile do you have? It's your connection context. If we need to get client-side interactions, okay, we're going to use sp.clientContext. Okay, this is our JavaScript CSON calls. Okay, that's our JavaScript CSON. Okay. And behind the scene, it translates to REST all data calls. Remember the client.svc file? Okay, this is a wrapper library, which whenever you do something, okay, so this gets the current context, context.getWeb, get current user. Okay, this queues up a batch of command. These are not real-time line-by-line execution. It queues up what to do. Action 1, action 2, action 3, and then load. Okay, it's like when you're controlling like the Mars rover, okay, because Mars rover is far away, right? You don't want to say move 2 meters forward and wait, and then move 2 meters to the right. Okay, what you do is you queue up 3 or 4 commands, move 2 meters forward, followed by right turn 90 degree, move forward by 3 meters, and then make another left 90 degrees and move out 4 meters. So these are queuing up 3 or 4 commands, and then you send it once, and the Mars rover follows. So here we're doing a context load. This is actually queuing up the batch, making the batch. This is the actual code execution. Okay. This is when we are actually sending the command, sending the batch. I should use the word sending the batch. Okay. And this is prepare or queuing commands. Okay. All right. So we need what's in the user, and in order to get user, it comes from web. The web comes from context. So we're queuing up the commands. Oops, I really can't type commands. And execute query async actually send it out. And there are 2 delegates, okay, or callback using JavaScript terms. Okay, when we successfully get the data, run this. If there's anything wrong, do that. And that, of course, is the name of a function, right? So this is what we're looking at. Okay, on success, do that. Now this is your JavaScript. This is your locator, right? This is your jQuery jQuery identifier. So we are saying the $ means the entry point of jQuery. I want to find an HTML element with an ID called greeting. Okay. jQuery locator. Okay. Once we find the HTML element, change the text to welcome to Contazo, and we'll get user title. Okay. And if there's an issue, say failed to retrieve user. Okay, so let me see if I can rephrase the question right. Okay, so right now we are seeing an app part. This app part communicates with Sharepoint through something called client context. Right? Now, this is one form of client-side interaction. Okay, this is going from a client side to the SharePoint. So SharePoint here exists as a service platform. Now exists as service platform. Remember the whole service-oriented architectures. SharePoint really isn't going forward to be a code execution environment. SharePoint will continue on to be a service platform which provides services such as, in fact, we used a service already. We are relying on SharePoint to identify who we are. We are already, even in simple sample like this, we're using SharePoint to uh, identify who the user are. Now, so as far as SharePoint is concerned, if you are programming using the app for SharePoint, okay, app for SharePoint is desirable because it's the same programming model whether you are on SharePoint Online or you own your SharePoint servers, okay, SharePoint on-prem. Either way, the development environment and experience is identical. Now, using this development model, okay, we have given a few options to interact with the SharePoint. So let's say here's your SharePoint. This example here, exercise 2, we're using JavaScript CSOM. Other alternative could be a .NET managed CSOM. So again, it's client-side object model, but it runs inside of .NET code. So I can actually write a Windows form and use similar code to what you see here to talk to SharePoint as a client. Does it make sense? And these are the two most common library because they are high level enough. Okay, these are considered high level. Okay, because the object model is designed so it closely resembles the server-side object model. So you can think of them as wrappers that exposes otherwise tedious interaction against the client.svc. So both of those actually hits the client SVC. If you would like to have low-level stuff, it's available as a REST service and OData queries. Now, this is only if you're doing app for SharePoint. Okay. Now, in the flip side of the argument, okay, you may say, hey, I'm sticking to SharePoint 2010 and I have enough investment on the way to 2010 is developed. I will continue to use farm solutions. I have no restrictions on permission whatsoever. Then you can look at, well, the classic web part application page framework. Okay. When you build with web part and application page, their code runs on the server using server-side libraries. Okay, that's your SharePoint dot something something dot DLL. For example, SharePoint dot administration dot DLL. That's your server-side library that runs on SharePoint servers. Okay, now because the way the client works, this whole green region that I'm drawing big circle over, in this green region, okay, it can be hosted in the browser. It can run on a Windows form. It can run on Node.js. It can run under anything as long as it's capable of HTTP protocol. And that's advantageous because now you can have a set of code that runs on Windows phones, that runs on the browser, and so on. Does that make sense? All data calls. The thing is, we don't want to be the ones that use the AJAX function and jQuery and manually issue and construct the request and manually interpret the results because that's a lot of work. So instead of doing that, we're using a higher level wrapper to this interface to make it easy. So So technically speaking, without worrying about how this page is delivered, it's safe to assume that all these functionalities are actually executed by the client browser. In fact, this client browser can receive this HTML from just about any server in the world and be able to run this, and it would have been fine. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and deploy this. Okay, so the part that you want to pay attention to, or that is somehow confusing, would be our web part called greet user part has no server-side code. Okay, it has no server-side code, and the actual programming code resides in the JS JavaScript file. Okay, and our JavaScript file issues JSON, the JavaScript CSOM library. Okay, and I'm sure you have a question. Where is that CSOM library? There it is, sp.js and spruntime.js. Okay, and you can find them under, layout 15 sp.js. This is all pretty. These are all boilerplate code. Okay, you always need these scripts. And if you want to take it one step further, you can always look at your 15 Hive and find this sp.js. Again, this is all server client-side code, so there's no hiding of these codes here. Okay, so this is significant. Notice this is not the same as your dev.contaso.com or team.contaso.com. Okay, so notice your project says we're deploying to dev.contaso.com, but the application is installed to its own domain. Okay, this is where the application actually runs from. This is what we call the app infrastructure. Okay, so let's go to dev.contaso.com. Okay. And if we're going to go ahead and edit the page, this time it's going to be an app part. Okay, that's it. Save and okay. So notice this is browser doing the work. Okay, and if you use the F12, I like to use F12 because that way I can see the script that's been used. Okay, and if I'm interested in debugging, I can do that as well. Okay. All right. So I can see a list of the JavaScript that's being used by this page, and sp.js. Okay. Of course, everything's been minified, so you can't really see a whole lot of these. Okay. So notice they can even coexist on the same page side by side. My top web part is a server-side web part. My bottom, they achieve the same exact thing. But this is a pure client tool. Okay. Very nice. And by the way, if you click on this, this will take you to the full page experience. That is the default page that we have built under the pages default.aspx. So when you click on that link, this is where you are taken to. Okay. Great user. And notice the URL on top That means it's hosted entirely elsewhere, right? Can we safely say that? This app is hosted entirely outside of dev.contaso.com. And in fact, if you look at the source of this page, show yourself. The entire thing is a iframe. An iframe of which the source comes from somewhere else. Notice the iframe source? That's exactly where this iframe source comes from. And within the URL to the ASPX, it provides the context. Notice it is through this URL here. It's hard to read it, but it's through this URL is that the other website knows where it comes from. Where is this where is this app part being embedded from? It's embedded from dev.contaso.com. Okay. And who is the host? Web. Okay. Contaso development site. And here is your SP app web URL. It's really long. Okay. Okay. So all that information is passed from the page where you're viewing the app art to the subweb that's actually delivering the page so your browser can run them. Okay? And this whole thing's an iframe. Any questions so far, folks? That's your app web URL. And again, if you read it closely, it's that app.contasoapp.com. Any questions? Stop recording.